The pursuit of the truth is often met with deceit, but the quest for liberty always discovers the truth. Hi, I'm Jake, managing editor of InternetDeputy.com, where it's not about politics, it's about freedom. Today I wrote an article and got really tied up in the article and found that it was extremely lengthy. And I try to keep it not so lengthy, although it's really difficult sometimes due to the amount of information that comes flooding in that I feel is important to include in certain topics of which I'm writing. Anyway, I am venturing out of the realm of my typical form of communication, which of course is writing. Writing happens to be, for me, the best way for me to express myself. I sound much better on paper or on website than I do spoken. And that's probably, I'm not the first person that probably says that. However, not only am I using verbal communication today, which is not my forte, I am doing it on video, which makes it a little more intimidating for me. So please forgive me if I stumble over my words. I just have a feeling that it would be better if I did this via video. Um, again, my name is Jake, and I hope you enjoy. On July 4th, TheGuardian.com released a story with the headline, Sex Robots Promise Revolutionary Service, but also Risk, says study. The article, written by Haroon Sadiq, is paired with a scholarly study and a video showing a feminist investigative reporter. Given the type of information mentioned in this article, it is necessary to begin by issuing the following caveat. The Internet Deputy is a conservative with elements of libertarian news fused with commentary reporting website. The goal in its reporting is essentially to expose those things that run contrary to freedom and liberty. This website seeks to show political fallacies as reported in the mainstream media, leftist media, in politics, education, and wherever else liberty is at stake. Internet Deputy seeks to maintain decency consistent with conservative values, some of the greatest values of which are liberty, respect of personal privacy and private property, and overall decency toward others. Therefore, Internet Deputy's purpose here is to neither support nor oppose the use of sex robots, but instead highlight a progressive thinking that seeks to defy the laws of nature and basic human instincts. Liberal progressives often claim that what happens in the bedroom is nobody's business, right? There are many examples of liberal thinking trying to normalize some of the most abnormal sex practices you've ever heard of. As reported by our website, Internet Deputy, in the past, they even try to reach young people's minds, encouraging practices that include homosexuality and masturbation at an early age. In some cases, as early as 10 years old. I have one article that actually shows UK teachers who think that they are more important than the parents in reaching toddlers. Imagine that, 3 to 5 year old children, in teaching them things like LGBT standards. But this type of thinking is often riddled with contradictions. For example, Muslim bakeries have been filmed refusing to cater gay weddings, but the mainstream media refused to report it. We'll never hear about it because Muslims are in a protected class. That is definitely a contradiction in liberal thinking, right? Liberal progressives, liberal progressivism is a de facto ideology for LGBT community, and most within are indeed progressive, yet liberals are claiming to support Sharia law, even though the Islamic ideology strictly prohibits the practice of homosexuality. It is also worthy to point out that the liberal protected Sharia is also promoting the ownership of women as objects, which happens to be central to this story. The Guardian text of the story is written as in most liberal news publications in a way to appear as objective. But it is mostly commentary. Early in the story, it is very clear that it is not in favor of the idea of sex robots. The story does point out some of the potential benefits, such as use as a masturbatory tool, or for people who simply cannot find a mate, but it is quick to show the potential objectification of women. Are we surprised to hear that in a liberal report? This has long been a talking point of the left, and particularly feminists who are against traditional Judeo-Christian marriage, male instincts, and anything in the pornography and sex industry. Um, the story also refers to a study by the Foundation of Responsible Robotics, FFR, who is a liberal organization in the UK that claims to stand for accountable innovations for the humans behind the robots. However, the only thing that FFR truly espouses is that that isn't political and based on decency is its position against makers of child sex robots. Beyond that, the organization is obvious in its feminist stance on almost every point that it makes against sex robots, and the study is very revealing. The so-called study is tantamount to a collection of opinions. Studies are supposed to be questions posed in the reporting of findings, not based on desired outcome, but empirical data, right? In other words, it's supposed to be a fact-finding study that shows, based on empirical questions and empirical data, what are the findings in relation, not what are the findings we want to have. Most of the questions and findings tend to follow typical liberal ideology in the study. But one question in particular showed findings that appeared as if they had been taken straight from a manual on feminism. The question, will sex robots change societal perceptions of gender? Bingo! That was perhaps the most telling portion of the study. One part of the rather lengthy section argues, quote, sex robots by their very design encourage the idea that women are subordinate to men and mere instruments for the fulfillment of male fantasy. This type of harm has been explored in the context of pornography and is reproduced in the harm caused by sex robots. Like pornography, use of sex robots sexualizes rape, violence, sexual harassment, and prostitution, and eroticizes the dominance of submission. Are you surprised to hear this? This statement, though cited, is based once again on an opinionated work. It is based strictly on speculation with no empirical evidence. Another problem is that it fails to remember that the makers of sex robots also make male versions. But ignoring this, this study only serves to support the feminist view of the issue. The same section of the study continues with a statement by Kathleen Richardson, a senior fellow in the Ethics of Robotics, De Montfort University in the UK. She proposes that male engineers in robotics are transferring their heteronormative and sexualized versions of women into objects they produce. Notice the new word, heteronormative. This isn't even a word. This is something they came up with. This is something some pseudo-intellectual jackass came up with. She made this word up in order to, I don't know, bring more case to her cause? Crazy. They like to use the English language to their advantage for sure, and creating new words is not beyond them. According to her, women are axiomatically considered to be in service to and as objects for men, and building female robots as sexual service, for sexual service only reinforces this notion. Again, she avoids the fact that they also build male robots for sexual service. And male robots have interesting parts, of course, of the anatomy that can be made as large or small as desired by the buyer. Another point made in this part of the study is that the market for these sex robots, based on what is demanded, could hamper any advances made by the causes of ridding the world of gender identity. In other words, these feminists feel that what people actually want will destroy their idea of gender neutrality. The study also takes the opportunity to insert another liberal talking point when it points out the how unfortunate it is that women participating in the occupations of computer science and artificial intelligence is very low. Again, somehow, somewhere, there is a systematic reason why women don't have as many jobs in these fields. There's an evil secret organization out there dedicated solely to the prospect of keeping women out of artificial intelligence and computer occupations, right? And that's what we're supposed to take from this. Just a little insert here. Begrudgingly, it also admits that even if the percentage were higher of women in the field, it would be the evil market that would demand the robots produced would not be gender neutral. In other words, people want their robots to look like men and women, as does the average man and woman want to view another man or woman as a man or a woman. Even gay people want their man, if they're gay, to look like a man in many cases. And many gay women, lesbians, want their women to be women. Surprise, surprise. The entire study is 36 pages long and essentially is a clever attempt at rehashing typical liberal talking points about feminism based on educated opinion, right? The news story itself in theguardian.com is mostly just conjecture based on the study. However, the attached video, which mentions little of the study, is of a feminist reporter who, instead of getting objective information, is actually just negative toward the manufacturers and researchers of the robotics. The reporter voices her opinion by asking robot makers evasive questions on how they feel about creating an object that is like owning someone. Her facial expressions give away the fact that she detests the answers given by her interviewees. She even asks a naked female model who is being cast for a robot body mold how she feels about men who will own the reproduction of her body and what they will be doing with it. The obvious feminist goes as far as saying in an irritated tone, because you know you are literally being made into a sex object here. In fact, it's really funny because she's got that whole British accent. You know, you're being forced into becoming a sex object here. You do know that, don't you? But the reporter's dismay is that the model answers that it did not bother her because she felt like she was helping someone who might have intimacy issues. She is probably also helping someone who has felt intimidated by even trying to ask a female out in the UK because they might be considered an evil male, and so therefore might find it easier just to get a robot. But then the video turns to a person also mentioned in the study, Kathleen Richardson, surprise, surprise, who alleges adamantly that the sex robots were bad for humanity and that they turned women into objects. She too uses the opportunity to pull out another liberal talking point. Richardson, in an emotional tirade, outrageously claims that using a sex robot also perpetuates a rape culture by virtue of the robot not requiring consent before sex. So because a robot does not require consent, this automatically means that men are raping them. Again, she does not allude to the fact that male robots are also produced, thus meaning that women who buy them must necessarily, according to her thought and her theory, be raping them, right? Crazy. This happens to conveniently coincide with the same charge that feminists say is taking place on college campuses in general. The current incarnation of feminism movement has for decades sought to degenerate and denigrate all forms of natural male behavior. It consistently shows its disdain for anything it perceives as dominant when it involves men. While feminists deny it, the groupthink states that they will not be satisfied until men are completely dominated by women, as proven by this study. Feminists do not want men to have sexual relationships with women. At every turn, they can be found discouraging males from pursuing women. in a society where men are treated with such hatred and liberal ideology, it is not inconceivable that they might want to turn to a device for a sexual experience that is more realistic than simple masturbation, right? Yet the feminist mindset immediately seeks to take that away from men as well. In other words, all men should be mindless, sexless, and genderless units. Such thinking, while portraying itself as seeking equality, is psychologically troubling and deeply rooted in hatred. This is the part they never want to admit. These people claim to be they claim to be intellectually, uh, scientifically based thinkers. The problem is when it comes down to it and you stop and think about it, imagine that these ladies have so much hatred toward men that they make their studies look like men are not even allowed to have sex. Okay, this is again, as I will point out later, is a very ironic part of this whole idea. But imagine you're not allowed to have sex if you're a man, and with a woman anyway. And now, if there's another alternative for having sex for men to get their sexual desires somehow met, they're going to stand in the way of that as well. That is called control. That is uh, that is pseudo-intellectual groupthink for what amounts to nothing more than totalitarianism, right? It is clear that there are likely valid questions to be raised regarding the use of sexual robots. I'm not disputing that here at all. The idea that there are potential backlashes to this certainly uh, are not in question. However, the real problems associated with this issue demonstrate the difference in thought between the two sides. Most concerns mentioned in the article and study deal with ethics and ethicists who deal with the issue. But conservative thinkers, when you think about it, rarely ever refer to ethicists or ethics in general. Ethics deal with what a group of people think uh, and decide what is decent and correct. But real world concerns come from morals and not ethics. Most of the views on the right consider morals to come from a higher source or God and not man. They are handed down for all people and not for a particular ideology. Even those on the right who don't believe in God understand the difference. I know several people on the right who don't believe in God, yet they totally understand the idea behind morals versus ethics. The ethics of the aforementioned anti-robotic feminists are certainly not in line with what every group of people believe. Um, but the real truth is in the irony of this article. Feminists are only a subgroup under the umbrella of liberalism, an ideology that, by definition, automatically allows people to be as sexually promiscuous as they like. How does the feminist ideology reconcile itself with liberalism? While feminism shows outright disdain for men, they show stronger support for liberalism even when it contradicts their own subheaded ideology. Essentially, before feminists are feminists, they are first and foremost liberals or liberal progressives. Feminist protesters, writers, and commentators such as Huffington Post contributor Leslie Marshall outwardly demonstrates this as they join forces with other liberal factions to support Sharia law. The radical ideology, ironically, supports the ownership as women in objects. But isn't that what we just discussed? That these feminist women who are against robots are supposedly against? Yet they're not crying out against radical Islam. Interesting, right? They make no mention of this. This creates a nonsensical circular argument that must withhold information in one way or the other depending on how it is being debated. There is no question, ladies and gentlemen, uh, that there is huge contradictions in liberal thinking. I think my article points it out pretty well. And I think that while the article intended by the Guardian was to show was to create a narrative, I think calling the narrative out is actually more important, because when these pseudo intellectual organizations write this nonsense, uh, we're supposed to take the information as axiomatic. We're supposed to assume that everything that's said in it is at face value. They want it to be taken that way, and because they're doctors and they're uh, uh, study people, and they are collegiate graduates that have all of this intellectual background, we're supposed to believe it all. And the truth is, intellectuals are not necessarily intelligent. There is a big difference. And I think it's really important that we keep this in mind. And uh, I hope that you like my article. I'm going to conclude now, and I hope you like it. Go to my website, internetdeputy.com. I hope I made a point today, and I hope you keep coming back, and I hope I have the courage to do this again on video. God bless, and have a great afternoon.